Vaartaalaap. Vaartaalaap means conversation, and I'm your host, Sudita. Today, I'll present a topic that is very close to my heart: women empowerment. I have received opportunity to do some field work in different countries, and with my personal experience, I can very well say empowering someone is not an easy task. It takes a lot of patience. There are different protocols that needs to be followed, and most importantly, we should know how and whom to empower. Our guest today has walked many miles bringing a positive change when it comes to women, their dreams, and how to achieve those dreams. With immense pleasure, I would like to introduce our guest today, Shamila Gopalan. Welcome, Shamila. Very pleased to have you on this segment of Vaartaalaap.
Thank you very much, Sudita. I'm actually very honored to be on this segment, and especially around the topic of women empowerment. And just like you, it's a topic that is very, very close to my heart. So thank you for having me.
In 2016, Shamila was honored as Asia's top 50 women leaders, and she contributed on a global level as an advisory council member of the World Brand Congress. She is the CEO and founder of Herwit, an advisory board member of Brilliant Women Global, a mentor, advisor of She Stats, and had a brilliant career as the commercial director of CNN and head of sales with Fox International, besides other achievements. So let's hear from you as we start our round one, which is Q&A, with your current initiatives. How are they different from each other, and which activity specifically adds peace of mind when you sit back and analyze your entire day?
Okay, if I got the question right, you kind of want to know what I'm currently doing and like what is it that gives me, I guess, purpose and drive? Is that the question? If I got it right?
Right, yes, because I've gone through your profile and you are handling multiple positions for different organizations. So which is the
Right.
very close to your heart?
That's a hard question because um, I have been quite lucky throughout my career, to be honest, in the sense where I think the companies and the positions that I was in and the jobs that I was doing were things that I have always wanted to do, that I've always enjoyed doing.
Mhm.
So I've been quite blessed in that sense. However, of course, there have been other challenges being in a corporate environment, being a woman, and specifically being a multicultural woman, a woman of color. There's a lot of things that come with that as well. But I would say my most enjoyable career path. I have two very, I guess, very close to my heart uh, organizations that had actually shaped me and shaped my career at a later stage. Of course, I've had a very long career. I've been in corporate for up to about 16 years and then started my own business. But those two companies are the National Geographic Channel, which is part of Fox International, and I was leading their digital team, as well as Corbis, which is or used to be a Bill Gates company where we did rights and licensing. And the reasoning for that was because I think in both occasions in one I had very strong team members. Uh, we were not very big, but we were not very small. We, I guess, worked really well together.
Mhm.
The organization looked at wanting to build us and develop us, and especially me in the digital side, to develop our skill set. So I think that was it was the people, it was the organization, it was the leadership that really made me learn, grow, and treasure those friendships. I mean, some of those people are friends till they become friends till today. So yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. And that sounds wonderful, Shamila. As you described, feeling of content and happiness adds more value to the work we do every day.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think you want to, I mean, there's a huge research and stats show that a lot of people leave their jobs or their careers not because they don't enjoy what they're doing, but it's because of their managers or their leaders. Yeah, so I guess when you have those things in line and you have the right team in place, it does, and you spend so much time at work. You spend 8 hours, sometimes nine, 10
Mm,
hours a day at work. And that's pretty much a huge chunk of your lifetime at work. So you do want to be in an environment, yeah, and you want to be in an environment that is positive, that nurtures you and allows you to grow.
definitely, yep. A common question that I have always come across is how far are we from gaining the same status as men and can happily say we have achieved the same heights? What's your perspective on that?
Um, Well, I have a very strong perspective on this question because it basically pertains to gender equality
Yes.
as well as equity. So, just to give you some perspective, I think this year, 2020, marked the 109th annual International Women's Day that
Yeah.
we've had. So we've had 109 International Women's Day, right? And they've all started, from a march of 15,000 women demanding shorter working hours, better pay, and the right to work. I
Mhm.
think we've got one, which is the right to work. I'm not sure about the better pay or the shorter working hours, but yeah. And I think on the subject of gender parity, we have a long way to go, to be
Mhm.
quite honest. I mean, around the world, 10% of girls aged between 15 to 24 are illiterate.
Mhm.
33,000 girls become child brides every day. 33,000, that's 12 million girls each year. Approximately 4.1 million girls undergo some form of female genital mutilation every year. And this is projected to rise. And
Mhm.
only 6 countries give women equal work rights in today's day and age,
Yeah.
right? So because of all of this, the World Economic Forum has a gender report that has come out, and they do this every year. And they estimate that it will take a staggering 257 years to close the economic parity and opportunity gap. This
Yes.
is, this is huge, right? And I mean, let's talk about Australia. So um, in Australia, it's no better, right? The Workplace Gender Equality Agency, WGEA,
Mhm.
reported that the average Australian gender pay gap is at 13.9%, which is 4%. Okay, um, meaning that your full-time average weekly earnings difference between men and women is approximately about $242.90.
Okay.
So, I mean, that is a huge difference in terms of where we're at this point of time. So, I do think there are some areas that we have gained. I think education, and also, again, it's very contextual and relative to the community and the country that you're in. But
Mhm.
if you're looking at a developed country, then obviously, from an educational standpoint of view, we have that parity. I guess from a voting standpoint of view, we have that parity. From a workforce, as in women being part of the workforce,
Yep.
yes, we are part of the workforce, but there is a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done to continuously keep women in the workforce, number one. Number two, grow women in the workforce to positions of leadership. And number three, put women on boards.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we still have a long way to go.
Okay. Just to step forward to this question, taking a step forward again, is there an index, like the Human Development Index, for example, is there an index to measure the exact position or exact number of females in who are actually can be said who are underprivileged or something like that? Is
Or
there
empowered in a sense.
yeah, is there an index worldwide that measures these kind of
I I think it's hard to have a standardized index to measure women empowerment. When you actually want to look at that from a global perspective and having one standard index,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to look at, um, you know, there are several variables that you actually have to look at, and those variables are very much it goes back to understanding the community, right? Uh, you have to look at it from a relatively contextual position, where
Mm-hmm.
you have to look at the cultural and social position and the economical position of where that woman's circumstance is.
Yep.
So the broader aspect where, I think Oxfam has done a few, CARE has done a few. You have the World Economic Forum that's done surveys on this, and they use a broad dimension which covers five main areas, right? So the areas they look at is economic, so having control over income and family resources, ownership of assets, the opportunity for employment, representation in decision-making roles in economical situations or organizations. So that's one area. And then you have the social and cultural element, which is, whether there's an absence of discrimination against women and girls,
Mm-hmm.
control over their own bodies, right? And access to family planning,
Yeah.
freedom from domestic and sexual violence, and all these kinds of like shifts away from cultural subservient norms. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so that's those abstracts, and then the third area is legal. So expansion of legal knowledge, your legal rights.
Yep.
Do you understand? Do you have access to the judicial system to create reform?
Yeah.
And then you have political, which is the fourth, is the right to vote. So in most places, yes. I mean, I would say across the world, but there are still certain countries and certain communities where you do not.
Mm-hmm.
Representation at governmental levels. I mean, Australia has shown a very poor, as a developed nation, representation of women in the political levels or in the government levels. And then the fifth is psychological. So whether we have the public acceptance of women's rights, the
Mm-hmm.
feeling of happiness, inclusion of women in society in different areas. So I guess so, these are the blanket areas that they look at, but again, it could be true or useful, or across all cases, or maybe even none, right? So there is a challenge in measuring women's empowerment because it just doesn't scale well. So and it doesn't scale well because it looks different again from country to country, communities, individual women. Like you can have two very same women from the same, I guess, school, with the same cultural backgrounds, but have very different experiences for many, many different reasons. So it's quite complex. But however, saying that, it does not mean that we shouldn't try, right? So which is why I refer to CARE has a measure called We Measure, which is a new tool to measure women's empowerment in health programs.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the innovations for poverty action, where they provide a summary of the current research and links to measuring women's empowerment. Oxfam does this quite well. The World Economic Forum does the Global Gender Gap Report pretty much every year. And then you have the United Nations that
Mm-hmm.
also has a program where they look at the Human Development Index, which includes a gender section. So there are measurements, but there is no one size fits all, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. Because after traveling to different countries across the globe, I feel the situation is very relative, as you just mentioned, and
Mm,
to based on which country we belong to or the individual experiences too. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. But also, Sudita, I just wanted to go back to the point where you asked me about, because this thought just came to me. It's very, very timely and relevant on
Mhm.
your question on gender equality, and are we there? Um, I think with COVID-19 recently,
Mhm.
there have been several policies that have been put in place, right? So we have the job keepers uh, payment that kicked in.
Yeah.
However, I think the government had recently axed that particular job keepers section for childcare,
Yeah,
for
yes.
free childcare, which was deemed essential during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that itself showcases that how they undervalue the female dominated early childhood education sector. Now, it's not, that is one area. With this particular measure, it also does affect women who want to go back into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there is a huge gender disparity in wanting to keep having women back into organizations or back into the workforce after they have a family.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do not, because Australia is one of the most expensive countries in the world for childcare. Now, if we do not look at those kinds of measures and try to mitigate that and understand that from a policy perspective, how are we going to reach any kind of gender equality, even in a developed country like Australia?
Yeah.
And what makes it even worse is Scott Morrison announces, as soon as he cuts the childcare package, he announces a shovel-led recovery,
Mm-hmm.
which basically gives up to about $700 million to the construction sector, where construction is the second most male-dominated profession in the country. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that speak to you in terms of, trying to elevate or shorten the gender gap in the workforce, or just generally as women, like from an entrepreneurial standpoint of view, from a workplace standpoint of view? So I think that is something that is quite timely, that has just happened recently, that goes back to your question of whether that is something that has been achieved, and it clearly has not.
Yeah. Sure. So, what are your views on measuring success when it comes to women empowerment, besides what you just mentioned?
I think when you say measuring success, as in from an organization standpoint of view, or from an individual standpoint of view, or
In general, like, say, for example, like I'm on my maternity leave, and my organization, say, for example, this is just one of the examples. So they are actually waiting for me to get back, which actually had helped me to, look after my family and keep a work-life balance, which is good. So there may be some situations which are, on the contrary, different to what I'm experiencing. So
mm,
when I say measuring success, so from an overall perspective, what do you think? Like, where are we with women empowerment? Or what are the things or characteristics that we should look at to measure empowerment?
I think okay, I let me just turn that question around, because I think I've kind of answered where I see women empowerment,
Mm-hmm.
and where that sits from a global perspective, as well as in Australia, and also in terms of the measurement area. But I think what we can do in
Mm-hmm.
terms of boosting women in order to empower them is, I mean, from an organizational and governmental and policy standpoint of view, I think we need to offer women, number one, more training and education opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can upskill and cross skill and step into new roles. So that will basically give them the pathway to senior leadership and board positions. I think very important, and this discussion is happening today, in the past 2 weeks globally, is ensure that hiring procedures are free from bias and promote diversity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So not just box ticking and trying to do one workshop a quarter just to tick a box in an organization, but actually having those policies implemented and making sure that there is true inclusion,
Yep.
and you take away the bias from hiring. And I
Mm-hmm.
think this speaks very much clearly and truly and resonates within the multicultural community that do come here and are trying to find a workplace, or find their first job, or even move up the career ladder. So I mean, I'll give you an example. For me, when I first came here 2.5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I thought, okay, I'm gonna go try and see what it feels like to, for me to look for a job. And because I had run two businesses back in Asia, and I sold one and I moved here, and I thought, I'm not going to want to be an entrepreneur anymore. I want to kind of take a break, and I want to go back into the workforce and see how that was. And I still remember, going into recruiters and stuff. I have, and I'll be very honest with you, I come in with a global experience and international experience, and I do not have some of the, I guess, qualities or biases that would be held close to migrants that come through. But even with that, there were challenges trying to get back into the workforce for someone as experienced as me. So I think there really needs to be that implemented, right? Foster an inclusive work culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think also, I've spoken about this, is addressing women's underrepresentation in business leadership positions. We cannot just put out reports and talk about statistics and say, oh, we need more women leaders. I think we really, organizations, companies, startups, it doesn't matter, across the board, even communities, even non-profits, we should definitely look at how we can include women in positions of leadership, which goes back to my first point of upskilling, cross-skilling, so that they can achieve that position.
Yeah.
And I think also shift attitudes about women's roles and work in society. I think that's a very big factor, which even permeates still today in Australia, because there is still this I guess attitude or perception that if a couple decides to have children, most of the time, I'm not saying this is all the time, but most of the time, the woman will always be the person that takes that step back in staying back and looking after their children. So that takes a toll on their careers. It puts a hold on their careers, right? And that does affect their long-term growth to some extent. I mean, in your case, your organization is very supportive, and we need more organizations like that.
Definitely.
Who, still holds true to what is important and still wants to develop women and give them the opportunity, even if they do have to go away and have babies and come back.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
move on to our next round, which is cat out of the hat, where answers will
Okay.
be in a single word. So shall we?
Will be what? Sorry?
In the form of a single word.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
So here comes the first one. What is the most challenging behavioral trait of society when it comes to women empowerment?
Wow, I have so many words for that.
You can give me a couple of characteristics. That's gonna be absolutely okay.
I would say, sorry, so the question is, what are the challenges?
Yeah, the challenging behavioral traits of society when it comes to women empowerment.
Okay, bias, that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
I would say bias is a huge one. Lack of I guess, empathy.
Mm-hmm.
What's that word? It's not discrimination, but it's yeah, I would say bias is lack of empathy. I just had a brain meltdown, but okay. Let's go with those two words, shall we?
So moving on to the next one, what are the predominant or basic qualities that needs a boost in a woman when considering empowerment?
Confidence,
Okay.
communication,
Mm-hmm.
fearlessness, and self-love.
Okay. So, and the last one, is women empowerment easier to achieve in developed countries?
In terms of countries,
Is it easier to achieve in developed countries?
that's a tough question again. I mean, because I think it has to again go back to not just, there's so many variables, right? So it's not just about the country. It's also about within a country, there are different communities and societies, and within communities and societies, there are different cultural beliefs and norms and social norms. So I think it's a lot more complicated than that. So I'm sorry, I can't give you a one word answer. So I think my answer would be no.
Makes sense. With
Yeah.
conclude our session today. Thank you so much, Shamila, as
Uh,
and on behalf of Vaartaalaap, I wish you loads of success in the coming days. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Stay tuned for next Vaartaalaap. I'm your host, Sudita Dasgupta. Goodbye.